Oh, sure. I take a week off, and all of you thought I'd lose my way back to the studio, but here I am. It's Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. That means it's Mission Log Live time. And I'm John Champion.
And I'm Josh Kurz.
Whoa. Wait a minute. The Josh Kurz, co-host and producer of Shabam, right here on the Roddenberry Podcast Network.
The one and the same, appearing tonight as guest host on Mission Log Live. Thank you for that. And we're going to do what we do on Tuesday, which means talking Trek. And tonight, we are glad to welcome our special guest, Dr. Erin Macdonald, who is a PhD astrophysicist and science consultant to the entertainment industry. Erin is a font of knowledge, and here's where you come in. You get to ask her questions, share your comments, and be a part of the conversation. I want to know what would happen to your body in a black hole? Ask her. You want to know if you really die by going through a transporter? Ask her that. Definitely ask her that. Click on the Zoom meeting link, use the one tap from your smartphone, or call us at 669-900-6833. That number again is 669-900-6833.
I'm thinking, with Erin here, I also want to talk about food in space, cocktails in space, jazz in space. These are the things that are important to me, and I feel like Erin can address them all. So as Josh said, you give us a call or you click on the Zoom meeting link. You do what you got to do. Earl is standing by. He so badly wants to talk to you, and then you talk to us. Now, Josh, there is a thing that we do on this show. We say hello to our Star Trek pals. So right. I don't know how much of Mission Log lore you know, but the whole idea is that, we talk about Star Trek. Our listeners are talking about Star Trek. We don't always get to talk together about Star Trek, but there are Star Trek pals. They're part of the conversation. We are their pals. They are our pals. So we're going to say hi to the Star Trek pals who are right now in the conversation. Let's do it. Ron, we got Chris, we got Casey, we got Carlos. David saying specifically, hello, John and Josh, and welcome to Josh. We got Carlos saying cross circuit to be. Very good, Carlos. We got Karen, we got Chuck, we got Barry. Carlos also saying Shabam. So,
Shabam!
Yeah,
nice.
Directed directly at you. Yeah. We got Scott Palm, we got Peter and Alan. Wait a minute. Alan says no need for jazz in space. Oh, I disagree, Alan. There is always a need for jazz, especially in space. Yeah. Rick, Ham, nice to see everybody. And since you're here and you just heard us do our thing, now you have to do your thing, which is you pick up the phone and you call 699-900-6833, or you click on the Zoom meeting link. And then in an instant, you're talking to Earl. And a few instants later, you're talking to us and Erin, and that will be fun. So before we introduce Erin, and before we get into the rest of the show, we do want to say a few things about what is coming up and sort of the business of Mission Log and the Roddenberry Podcast Network. So Rod, you may have heard of him, Josh. Rod Roddenberry?
I think so. Yeah, I think there's a network.
Yeah,
that we're on.
He's a guy. Yeah, they do things. Yeah. So Rod will actually be in Sansar on Thursday night, December 5th at 7 p.m. Get your free account there, sansar.com. And I've been teasing this for so long, and I'm so sorry because there are details that have to come together before I can give the full announcement. But we are planning a special Star Trek The Motion Picture 40th anniversary event in Sansar. Has to do with guest and guest availability, but it'll be a chance for you to talk to. It looks like, and I shouldn't say it, but somebody who worked a little nearby on that movie. So I will say no more. But just please keep an eye out for it. I'll post it on the Facebook site, facebook.com/missionlogpod. We'll get the word out. Sansar will get the word out. So now is your chance. Go to sansar.com. If you're running Windows 7 or above on your computer, get your free account there. You can either do it in VR or in desktop mode. And I don't have a segue for this, so I apologize. there is a piece of news, a piece of business that we're going to talk about just a little bit later in the show. But this morning, a lot of us got the news that we lost a member of the Star Trek family, and a very important and just a strong personality. We lost Dorothy Fontana, DC Fontana. You may remember that she wrote some episodes under the name Michael Richards. But she contributed so much to Star Trek, going back to even pre-Star Trek. She was Gene's assistant, then she was story editor on the original series. Her scripts are among some of the finest that were ever written. She wrote the pilot for Star Trek The Next Generation. There is so much that is attributed to her. And we do have another guest we're going to bring in a few minutes to talk about that as well. So we're just going to shelve that for a second. But I want to let people know because they're asking if we're going to acknowledge that. And yes, absolutely. And if you want to call in and talk about DC as well, please do. It was a shock to a lot of us.
Yeah.
Now, before we introduce our guest, we also like to ask our listeners a poll question. A couple of weeks ago, before the Thanksgiving break, we were talking about the latest Star Trek short, Ask Not. And in that one, it was a little bit of a thing going on with Cadet Sidhu. And we asked, whose psych test was scarier? Was it Cadet Sidhu or was it Wesley Crusher? Who got the worst psych test? 53% of you said Cadet Sidhu. 47% of you said Wesley Crusher. Now, here's the thing. I still think either way, it's psychological torture. And I do think that some twisted individual at Starfleet looked at Wesley and was like, you know what? He lost his dad. Let's recreate that for him. And he has to make the same choice. It's sick. It's twisted. It's sadistic. I don't get it, but that's what happened. So 53% of you thought that Cadet Sidhu had a tougher time in her psych test. Now, this week, Josh, you posed a question in honor of our guest.
Yes. My question is, do you think that most people get their science information from TV and movies? Yes or no?
Now, specifically, though, you mean you're asking our listeners, do they think that other people or most people in general are getting their science info?
Yeah, when you think about, the general knowledge of science that people have, are they getting that from movies and TV, or are they getting that from, reading about the topics that they're interested in? Right. So that's the question, because, in a lot of ways, and this isn't a knock on people who get their information from TV. It's just like there's a lot of things that happen in TV and movies that only happen in TV and movies that we just wouldn't experience if we didn't see a scripted version of them. So you can't really blame people for getting what they think of certain things from movies. So anyway, that's the question.
And then I guess the question then becomes, well, is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? Because even if the information might be incorrect, I would say if it's sparking an interest, that's probably a good thing. And our guest will be able to elucidate and illuminate on that a bit as we talk to her. Now, a full 77% of you said yes. You think most people are probably getting their information or about science from TV and movies. 23% of you said no. Yeah, I think that's probably about accurate for the population at large. Yeah.
And this is why I and other science communicators believe that you should make science accurate in movies.
Yeah.
That is the bone we have to pick.
And I would say that a full 100% of you should be listening to Shabam to get a little more science information.
Thank you, John.
Yes. And 105% of you should meet our guest.
Yes.
Dr. Erin Macdonald, speaking of bringing science to science fiction and entertainment. Dr. Erin Macdonald, PhD, or as it's pronounced, I believe. She is an astrophysicist. She is a consultant to the entertainment industry in film and television. She's an advocate for STEM. And honestly, who shouldn't be? Everybody should be. an advocate for STEM education. And now she has a course on the Great Courses, which is available as an audiobook from audible.com, that is, The Science of Sci-Fi. So go check that out. Not right now, but after this.
And then after this, yeah.
Then you go check it out.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the show, Dr. Erin Macdonald.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here. And I love the thing.
See, look, when you hand out your card now, you just go, yes, hi, I'm Dr. Erin Macdonald.
I legitimately thought I glitched there for a second. So that's awesome. So it took me a little second to realize what you'd done. So that was very clever. Well played.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Every now and then I'm good for one. Now, most important, most pressing question. Any new tattoos that we should be aware of?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, at least since I was last here, actually,
Yeah.
I think a very significant one is that I got Voyager tattooed.
Whoa,
on my arm.
nice.
So yeah, I'm glad you asked that question.
Wow. Okay. We did not plan that, but I'm really glad that I did. So now we might have talked about this before, but I'll have to refresh my memory. Is Voyager your show? Is that your trek?
Janeway's my captain. And certainly if you list up like all of my top probably 20 episodes, a good portion are going to be Voyager episodes as standalones. But my favorite series is Deep Space Nine. So yeah, that's where that's.
Wow. Okay. Those have a little different feel to them.
Very different feel. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And when you say that some of your top favorite episodes are within Voyager, I'm curious. Not Threshold.
No.
Okay. And the people who wrote it say it's terrible.
Yeah. It's fine. And I just did a video on warp drive technology for StarTrek.com, and I kind of ragged on Threshold a little bit, and they actually left it in there.
No, really?
Which I was surprised about, but it was brilliantly edited. Check it out. It was very, very funny about what happens when we go warp 10.
Well, wait, so tell us a little bit about that. So it's a video up at StarTrek.com, and it's just purely about warp drive. So it's speculative, like, can we even get there? Is that a thing we could even possibly do?
Yep.
And beyond that, what happens if we do?
Exactly. And it's just a short video that StarTrek.com posted that basically is me explaining how warp drives work and like what the next steps are for us to be able to get there. It's so funny because I'm so optimistic about us getting warp drive technology and like super pessimistic about us getting to Mars. So
wow, really?
Yeah. So my background is in general relativity. So I did my PhD in gravitational waves, which is literally the motion of space-time. And warping space-time is how we get to warp drives. And so I don't know if it's just because I know I'm more comfortable with it or what it is, but I'm certainly a proponent for us getting to warp because we became scientists so we could join Starfleet, and we can't join Starfleet unless the Vulcans come, and the Vulcans aren't going to come until we get warp technologies.
Don't we have to put bases on the other planets first? And don't they have there's a lot of stuff we got to do. They got to get the solar system ready for when they do come, That's
in theory, yeah.
So you think we'd get to warp drive before getting someone on Mars?
No, I do not want to go on record to say that. But I think it's when we ask about what's needed for warp drive, I get very excited about it. And I think because it is so far out there, and because we just made this huge discovery in detecting space-time itself, that is one step closer. So it does feel like it's a little bit closer, but Mars feels really close, but there's still a lot of technology that we have to figure out that we haven't figured out yet. The rockets are one thing, but the radiation is another thing. So I guess it's one of those that, what do we get? Yeah, so I have to boost everyone on one side and I have to bring everyone back down to reality on another side.
So wait a minute. I want to stick on this warp drive thing here for a minute. Maybe it's the LA traffic thing that just has me always thinking about how can we possibly go faster? Let's build trains, please. But now warp drive, if I understand correctly, there's sort of two competing ideas here. And one is you get a thing that goes really, really fast But once you go past the speed of light, well, just all hell breaks loose because you're messing with relativity, and then you're aging slower than everything around you, and this
getting
is
heavier.
Yeah, you get heavier. This is a problem. This is all definitely a problem. The other approach is you bend space-time to come to you. So you're creating a warp field. Well, let's just call it that because it's a Star Trek thing. So,
Yeah.
Okay, all right, please
All right,
help us.
I'm gonna science this. No
Okay,
worries.
science it.
So
Yeah.
the two things you were talking about, one is like special relativity. So that's talking about as you start to go faster and faster and faster, weird things happen. And that is like physics does account for that. That's even before you get to the speed of light. And it just has to do with things that it's called time dilation or Lorentzian dilation. And that's the twin paradox, where if you leave, your twin stays on Earth, you fly, 8 years will pass for you, 10 years will pass for your twin, and you're no longer the same age. All of that is actually like within the realm of physics. It's just as distances and time start to shift as you move faster and faster within normal space-time. So a rocket ship booking it, not breaking any physics, just going very fast, that we don't have the technology to do now, but we, in theory, could. The warp technology on the other side, that is using the principle of general relativity, which is the bending of space-time. So what Einstein did with general relativity, he said, okay, we have this trampoline of space-time. What happens when you put mass onto it and it dips down? That's a bowling ball on the trampoline that I think a lot of people are familiar with. And it's hard to travel through space-time quickly when you have a lot of mass. The less mass you have, the less you're dipping it down. So it's easier to go faster and faster. And when you have no mass, you travel at the speed of light in a straight line. You're not bending space-time at all. So that's why the speed of light is our limit in our universe. But there's nothing in that says that space-time itself, or the trampoline, can't move faster than the speed of light. We're just talking about masses on space-time. So warp technology is this idea that you build a bubble of space-time around your ship, and then that propels you faster than the speed of light. What you mentioned there at the end was more like jump drives that we see in some other franchises, where you say, I'm here, I want to go there, so I'm going to bend that to me, I'm going to jump, and then that's
okay. And they're all wrong because their other franchises, they're wrong.
Yeah, we don't spend any time talking about those at all. They're not worth our time.
Can I ask a dumb question?
No such thing, but yes, absolutely.
Okay. So when you say the bending of space-time are like, let's say you look at a meter in space, like the length of a meter, and you're bending it, is the actual length of the meter getting bent? So you're not really experiencing it. It's just bending.
Yeah, and that's one of the hardest things to wrap your mind around, because we talk about that a lot with gravitational waves, because what we were trying to detect is the space-time doing that. So black holes collide, send all these ripples out, and they pass through the Earth, and it literally compresses and expands all of space-time. And we have these detectors on the surface of the Earth that are like L-shaped. And so as a gravitational wave, as space-time distortions pass by, one arm gets shorter, one arm gets longer. And we can detect those changes because we're sending light down in both directions. That's the very quick elevator explanation of it. But it's hard to wrap your mind around.
How are you measuring it if the measuring thing is also getting...
Yeah, so that's really... And so it has to do with how the wavelengths are compared against each other. And there is... Because that's where people ask, well, is the speed of light actually changing? And there is an explanation for this, and I am not very good at distilling it into less than like a 15-minute explanation, but there is a great article that someone wrote that explains why, if the arm is getting shorter here and the arm is getting shorter here, then the light and everything is being distorted. So how are we detecting it anyways? Is a totally valid question. And there's a whole article I'll post on my Twitter, and I'll send you guys the link, because it will derail this entire conversation. that is an excellent question.
I apologize.
It's okay.
See what you did, Josh. You said, I have a dumb question, and then boom.
It's a brilliant question. That
is awesome.
completely valid.
That's all I can do is come up with the questions.
Yeah. No, that's like the guy who shows up at karaoke and says, "Oh, I've never done this before," and then just does an amazing
like
job,
that.
and you're like,
No.
"Oh, I have a dumb question," and then boom. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, one of the most nuanced, detailed, well-observed questions when it comes to gravitational waves you just asked.
By the way, some very interesting stuff being discussed right now in the chat. And there's one that David has mentioned here that is something that I had heard about, because I actually heard about this on a podcast the other day. So he wants to talk about ion propulsion. I heard a discussion the other day on a show about nuclear-powered spacecraft, where you can really cut down. I think ion would theoretically be faster, but nuclear-powered spacecraft is still cutting in half what we can do now with chemical rockets. So these are all very interesting things to get into. And I kind of want to steer that a slightly different way, Erin, because what you're talking about, all this, the sort of fun, sexy stuff is like bending space-time and creating warp bubbles. And all. But I want to know, what are the things that are exciting you about sort of the next leaps in exploration, the next leaps in scientific breakthrough? Because you're pessimistic about Mars, but here are two things that are being developed right now that hopefully could actually cut that trip down. So are there things that are just on the horizon, just, maybe a generation away, that you go like, oh yeah, that's a cool next step. Then hopefully we get to warp drive or whatever else.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think when it comes to ion drives, it's important to note that both ion engines as well as nuclear power are used in space today. When we're sending spacecraft out, I think the Dawn spacecraft, which went to explore the asteroid belt, used an ion engine. Now, we hear ion engine and it sounds cool in sci-fi and space battle type stuff. It is very slow and not entertaining at all. Like, because all it is it's just spitting out like ions out the back of your spacecraft. And that's a force. So you have, action and reaction. You spit an ion out that way and the spacecraft moves a little bit. You spit another way, it moves a little bit, and nothing's slowing it down. So, but you can't turn super fast or make cool moves. So yeah, but it's used. And the more we invest in that, absolutely. And the nuclear power, we had, what was that it was well over a year ago. The dust storm that encompassed all of Mars that knocked Opportunity out of commission. It went out because it relied on solar power, but Curiosity continues to go because it uses nuclear power. So although it has some solar panels, it is still powered by nuclear technology. So Curiosity will be able to continue working even if there are these big massive solar storms or windstorms on Mars. So those are still two technologies that we're using today and just continue to develop that are exciting and cool and make space more accessible. The stuff that I lose my brain about is when it comes to exploring our solar system is many things. I think I am thrilled that we have plans to go to Europa and to Titan, because I think those are the two of the most exciting places in our solar system that we need to explore more. Europa, we've not really been to. The Juno spacecraft is around Jupiter taking awesome pictures and awesome data. And it's, passing by, but it's not landing on Europa. And there's a mission planned, for the next decade that's going to go there. And that's actually a good shot at finding life elsewhere in our solar system, is under the surface of Europa. And then Titan is similar. We dropped a probe into Titan back in about 15 years ago. And it took cool pictures. We saw beneath the surface, it landed, but it wasn't meant to do anything else. It was just a lander. And so sending a spacecraft there that's going to spend significant amount of time at Titan is awesome. Titan's one of the coolest, just awesome. Just when that Kelvin movie, when the Enterprise comes out of Titan's atmosphere, I cry every time.
Okay, that is a great shot.
That's a great shot.
But you're talking about Europa, and we got a message though that says all these worlds are yours except Europa. Attempt no landing there.
There's a big black square there.
Yeah,
rectangle.
And it happened like 9 years ago. The year
I know,
we made
it happened
contact,
9 years ago.
Okay?
Yes.
Yeah. So just saying.
So what about Enceladus? That's not cool. It's like
Enceladus. Okay, yeah. Enceladus is also awesome. So it's like Europa. It's an ice moon, and it's going around Saturn, but it isn't as churned as Europa is, because Europa is next to Jupiter, and it's one of the Galilean moons. So it's in resonance with the other moons the other major moons that are going around Jupiter. So it gets churned a lot. That's why we see these huge cracks down the side of it that then water comes up and forms. That all of that churning results in actually a warm ocean underneath the surface. And so Enceladus, it still has an ocean under the surface, and it still has some warmth because of the gravitational tug, but nowhere near as much as Europa does. So still valid and excellent point.
Okay. I was gonna ask another follow-up to that, but I know we got to go to the next thing. So
no, hey, just very quickly, we're a little ahead of the bottom of the hour, but I think this is a good place because I want to take just a short pause and then welcome somebody who's been holding on the line since the top of the show. We don't have an ad this week, but I do want to give a shout out to a couple of products and one person. Chris Riker was kind enough to send us a copy of his book, Come to Eventide. Come to eventide.com. We did a little more full ad for that a few weeks ago. But Chris, thank you again. Thank you for your support of Mission Log. And thank you for the book, which you can find at cometoeventide.com. And also, not a paid ad, but these are just so cool. And I do love wine. So anybody who is in the North Hollywood, greater LA area, I got a bottle of Chateau Picard 2386. Can't wait to get into that. But then the special stuff, I think you need to bring down to Ken's on Christmas, the Special Reserve, which is an Old Vine Zinfandel 2017, but it's got the UFP logo on it. So I'm very excited about that. So the reason I mention it, I believe you still get 15% off if you use ST Wines at StarTrek.com. So the code is ST Wines to get your 15% off. And then, hey, we'll all share a toast of Chateau Picard sometime on air, maybe. We'll see. I mentioned at the top of the show that we lost somebody very important to the Star Trek family today. And I had the good fortune of being able to meet her because I work on another show here called The Trek Files that is hosted by Larry Nemeczek. And Larry called up his friend Dorothy Fontana one day and said, come on down to Roddenberry and let's talk about Trek. And we dug up some amazing documents, memos, things that either she had written, or one of my favorites, Larry, was actually it was a fan letter written the day after This Side of Paradise aired, an episode that she wrote. That fan letter shows up, literally the day after, and that letter shows up at the Star Trek production offices. Here it is, more than 50 years later, and we're showing her that fan letter about that episode that she wrote. That she'd never seen that letter before. It went to Gene, and gets filed away. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're welcoming Dr. Trek himself, Larry Nemeczek, to check in with us and just say a few words and acknowledge Dorothy's contribution.
Yeah. And thanks, John, for having me in. Just for a few minutes, because I know this is, hey, Erin, it's Erin's night, and Josh is doing great. So, yeah, my gosh, today on Trek Files, our episode this week was David Gautreaux, who played Commander Branch, but was supposed to play Zahn in a whole different, configuration. We had this great 40th anniversary week set up. And as happens, news happens. And Dorothy, wow, I'm almost sitting here wondering if in our social media era, if maybe Leonard's passing has hit, at least, I won't go as wide with media, but in fandom, if maybe Dorothy's passing has hit people hard, because, and I always am concerned, and I always do my part to make sure that, hey, I'm right there for Discovery and Picard and be excited. And I reserve the right to critique, but I'm excited about everything. But I always also want to make sure that everybody continues to know what the foundation stones were, right? And where things come from. And my God, Discovery goes right back to Sarek and Amanda and Spock, which Dorothy created, right? With Journey to Babel. Yeah. And so much of, it's like, so Dorothy is there creating core root Star Trek that is the reason for the popularity of the thing that all those people, mostly women, got off on in their fan fiction and created their zines that led to clubs, that led to cons, that led to, hello, Comic-Con culture today. Okay?
Right. Yeah.
Bang. You can put Dorothy right in the middle of that as well as Star Trek. But she's also someone that started off, as a secretary before they were assistants even. They were secretaries, and she worked with Sam Peoples, and she's in that soup of the creativity of early, which we've gotten into on the Trek Files, which were some of my favorite ones, talking about Sam Peoples and some of the threads that led to Star Trek. So here's somebody who worked in the industry as a girl that showed up in LA because that's what she wanted to do. And she's a woman in the late 50s, early 60s doing this. And she comes out of the secretarial pool and she climbs her way, should have been advanced much faster than she would have been, goes by DC, right? Not Dorothy. But she's there for early TV, for the people that she worked with, and Gene, and the roots of Star Trek, and then what she did for Star Trek. And then the animated series is the guts of the animated series are due to Dorothy, even though nobody bothered to tell Filmation apparently at times.
Right.
Because isn't this just another little Saturday morning cartoon?
Yeah.
No, this is a Star Trek. And then to come full circle back around and be invited back by Gene for the roots of Next Generation. And even Pete Fields and Ira for the first season and Mike Pillar for the beginnings of DS9. And she pitched Dax when no one knew what the hell exactly symbionts and trills are. She's just amazing. But maybe most of all is what she's done. What really struck me today and what you touched on when she came in for the Trek Files. We're so blessed that she was still with us until today. Because we had her on the last episodes just in May, which is, I was looking at dates today.
Yeah.
And it's like today she passed and it was like, wow, how spoiled she was just this direct pipeline to 1964. Everyone else has passed. Gerald worked in those times. There's very few of the original series that we're losing. The first season, Next Generation, the Roots people are almost all passed.
Yeah.
So it's like we were so spoiled to have this, pick up the phone, text her, email. Hey, Dorothy, I do my column in the magazine and somebody had a shout out to Stephen Austin. Was he breaking the fourth wall in the tag of Journey to Babel? Or what was that? Was anybody upset with that? Or was that a decision of, it's like, I'll ask Dorothy because she's here and it was her show. And it's like, oh, I can't do that anymore.
And what I love is that when she was here in the office, and she was 80 years old, that her memory, she would say that it wasn't great. She was like, these are things that happened 50 years ago, but you'd hand her a document and she would just rattle off like, oh yeah, this happened and this happened and I talked to that guy and this happened. I mean, she was just right there with it and fantastic recall of everything that was going on. She was so direct and no nonsense. And I love the idea. Of course, I only met her on those occasions that she came here to record the Trek Files. Neither of us were there back in the day when TOS is being put together. But when you meet somebody like her and you get you get a sense of the personality, and you can just go like, oh, okay, now I get it. Now I get that this was the production office might have been the chaos nonsense of the boys club, but this is somebody who's holding it together. This is somebody who is actually doing incredibly hard work and doing this tremendous creative output. And we have so much to thank her for her contributions to Trek.
Yeah, Unflappable comes to mind, but you also get a sense of in that boys club, and you read about how crazy fun. Maybe some today would go, that skirts the,
right.
in the whatever lens you're looking at the 60s with today.
Yeah.
But you see this, all the shenanigans, who's the mistress in the office today, and what are the boys pulling, and here's Unflappable Dorothy, and at the same time being a survivor and being the one that keeps peace among all the camps. At the same time, she's a woman in the early 60s pulling herself by her bootstraps.
Yeah.
And yes, she should have been a producer, not a story editor, and all of that. And she went away from Next Generation's first season feeling a little burned and did not want to talk about it. But she's the one that's there trying to keep peace when there's chaos on the bridge first year of Next Generation. Yeah. But even, as the years passed, when I first wrote the Next Gen Companion, she did not want to talk about those years, only 5-6 years. But thankfully, it's been more than 5-6 years now. And she did. She opened up and she has shared. She taught at AFI. She was on the boards for Writers Guild, on several committees. I mean, she worked for her craft. She won some awards. She won writing awards. She has a couple of guild awards, I think. But she was such on top of being a professional and a class act, just with people, she was a sharer and a mentor for writers. And she would go to cons, large and small, from the 70s to today when she could, and share with fans. I know I know people across the country have stories, especially just in the last few years when sometimes people wake up and they go, "Oh, a treasure! I need to hurry up and treasure this before it's too late." Yeah. And I know people have those just the last few years, but as she was with us, what a sharer. And happy to do it. But yes, very direct and on the nose. And you can see why she lived long and prospered when she had that, kind of quality. And again, I just almost felt like I was chiding myself for feeling so spoiled that I just, she'll just be here forever. We'll just always be able to pick up a phone and ask her what was going on in 1964. And,
right.
Yeah, we can't.
Tonight after the show, I'm going to go home and watch Planet of the Amazon Women, episode from season 1 of Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, written by DC Fontana. That is my tribute. So, Larry, thank you so much. Great to have you on. And
thanks, guys.
Share a little insight.
Let's get together on that.
Now we're talking
on that.
Hey, come on. You know where the office is. You come on down. Let's make this happen.
Yep.
All right.
Anyway,
cheers.
Thanks, John. I'm glad you got to have a few minutes to talk about Dorothy. It's all, it's kind of taken over today. So
thank you very much. And thank you to our guest for indulging us to do that for a minute. Oh, and by the way, again, not to sound too crassly promotional about this, but we did list the episodes with Dorothy in them on the Trek Files page. So facebook.com/the Trek Files. They're just all in order in a row there. So you can check those out if you like.
Right. Thanks, John. Trek well, everybody.
All right. Till next time.
Have fun, guys.
Thank you. Bye, Larry. So, all right, Josh, I know, and thank you, Erin, and thank you, Josh, and thanks to the folks who are watching, who had asked about Dorothy, and some really nice comments here. Carlos saying Dorothy will always be with us, certainly through her fantastic writing and contributions to the entertainment that we love.
Yeah.
Now, Josh.
Yes.
I know you have a burning question.
I have a burning question, and it does not have anything to do with Enceladus.
And it is not a dumb question.
We've established those don't come out of Josh's mouth.
Right. So, Josh, now I get to indulge you.
All right.
To ask our guest.
So, Erin, this is my question. I want to know, I know this has been asked before, but I kind of want to, if you can help us walk through what would happen. But what would happen if you flew your ship, navigated your ship into a black hole, and
right.
I think it would be good to walk through it slowly, because I think we've heard about the spaghettification, but if we can just go, let's imagine what it would be like, because I think that's I want to know what would I physically be experiencing. So as it's happening, right, until the bitter end. This is what I'd like to know.
It's going to get really dark really
fast.
Let's
do it.
Yeah. It's the internet. Nobody cares. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You're right.
It's interesting because you're right. A lot of people kind of heard black holes, seen, the sort of diagram, what it looks like is this giant funnel, and have heard maybe the term spaghettification, which is up there as one of the greatest technical phrases of all time. But really thinking about what gravity is and what it means that when you have a black hole, essentially it's just a really deep gravity well. We talk about escape velocity, and when rockets, we know that the hardest thing about going into space is just getting off the surface of the Earth. And a lot of that's just our gravity well. We have a high escape velocity to crawl out of that well to go into space. And so if you have a more massive object, it's going to have a steeper gravity well and a higher escape velocity. And you get more and more massive, and your trampoline dips further and further, and you have a higher and higher escape velocity. It's harder to crawl out of. Eventually, you're going to reach the point that your escape velocity is the speed of light. And so not even light is going to be able to escape. The escape velocity is too great. And that's what a black hole is. And so that kind of addresses a lot of misconceptions people have, especially when we see cool black hole news, which we see a lot of these days. There's just amazing astronomy done surrounding black holes right now. But, I get text messages all the time that are like, oh my God, there's a black hole found in our galaxy. Is it going to consume us all? It's not, because black holes aren't vacuums. They're just really steep gravity wells. If our sun turned into a black hole, we'd, other than the lack of sunlight, be fine, because we would just continue orbiting like the normal gravity well that it is. And so that's important to think about, first of all. So you have a really steep gravity well. As you're starting to fall into a black hole, you have this huge stretch of space-time. And it's important to remember that space and time is being stretched when you have a steep gravity well. So the space stretching is the spaghettification. And that's when you reach the point where the gravity at your feet is greater than the gravity at your head, that the stretch is so much that you start to feel it and you start to get spaghettified.
Wait.
Yeah.
Let's back up a little bit. So we're gonna do this slowly. We're way too fast at the spaghettification already.
All right.
You're in the ship.
Yep.
You're going into the black hole. At first, what are we feeling? What are we feeling? Before we hit the event horizon, we're just kind of what?
We're feeling fine, but the people around us are they going slower? We're still experiencing time normally, but our time and time from the observers is starting to dilate. And so it looks like we're starting to move very, very slowly. And that starts to get more and more extreme. And what we're seeing in front of us, this event horizon, that's the point at which you can't get out. That's where the escape velocity becomes greater than the speed of light. We're seeing the remnants of all the light that has just about escaped. So everything that was just on the verge of getting out, we're seeing that. And as we're falling in.
So what does that look like? What does that look like? The remnants of all the light that hasn't escaped. What do we think that looks like?
It looks red because as light gets stretched from a gravitational well, it goes through, it's essentially the Doppler shift. And when people learn about the Doppler shift, red shift and blue shift, they hear about that from sound or from motion. But the same thing happens. So, light, if something moving away from us, it's like they're holding a slinky and we're holding the other end, and it gets stretched out, and that's called redshifting. But then the same thing happens when the light is being pulled into a black hole. So all these wavelengths start to get stretched out. And so it's all getting stretched out across the whole electromagnetic spectrum, but everything's moving in the direction. If you have blue up here and red down here, high frequency, low frequency, everything's moving in this direction. So it's going to be a lot of red light. And it's going to, as we're falling in, start to consume all of us, because remember, it's not like we're falling in like this. It's that it's three-dimensional. And this is where most people get a headache and are getting up from their monitors to go get a drink, which is okay.
Wait, but it's red. So you're seeing red. It's getting redder as you're heading towards the...
Yeah, and it's starting to consume all around you. Now, I'm going to pause because, again, I'm just saying, like, it's not that we're falling down into it. So it's not like we're seeing it beneath us. When we think of gravitational wells, that's easier for us to visualize. A more three-dimensional image of this is, imagine like mattress springs, and I stick my hand in and I grab them, and my hand is the mass, and all the springs are stretching toward my hand in all directions. That's really what like a more higher dimensional gravitational well looks like. So black hole, as seen in Interstellar, actually Interstellar is the best, most accurate depiction of a black hole.
Wait a minute, not Disney's The Black Hole? Because
Believe
I'm
it or
waiting.
not.
Okay, because I'm waiting for Vincent and Bob to make a heroic escape, and I'm assuming already Maximilian has killed Anthony Perkins. And there's Earl with old Bob on a stick. I wish all of you at home could see that. Yep. All right. Just making sure. All right. So Interstellar, yes. Black hole, no. Even though Black Hole's got Robert Forster, whatever.
It's fine. It's fine. But because it is all three-dimensional, and so it's kind of hard to picture that. But yeah, as you're falling in, it's that you have all this red light starts to consume you, and then you start to fall in, which means you are also space and time dilated. So
wait, are you feeling weightless right now because you're just falling?
No, you're starting to feel heavier and heavier, but like it depends what direction you are compared to the black hole. So if the black hole's in front of us, like you were kind of like a spaceship, like a Volvo.
Right, yeah, okay. Let's do it. It was Volvo.
Like we're driving a car into a black hole. The front is going to be pulled towards, so now your gravity is going to be in this direction. Whatever fancy gravity generators you have on the ship that are keeping your feet down and your head up are now pointless because the gravity is now being pulled forward in that direction, and they're outdoing the gravity generators.
So your face is being pulled farther than the back of your head?
Yep. And your arms are going out, and your face starts to go out.
It's like Beetlejuice, Josh. It's like Beetlejuice.
It's like every nightmare cartoon that you saw when you were a kid that gave you, but kept you up.
Okay. And then okay. So does it stop being red at some point and start being black? Like,
I mean, you see black when you're gone. Like,
not that black. I'm talking about.
But that process is taking a really long time, though.
Right. And so your whole concept of this is what I mean that it gets dark in like a morbid way because it is painful. And the time on your nose is going slower in your nose than it is in the back of your head. And it all just gets stretched. And again, so it's like, let's pretend, right? Instead of let's pretend I'm in the captain's chair because we like that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And we have our helms person up in front of us. Now, basically, it's going to look to me like they're moving in slow motion as they're screaming their cries of pain because I'm further away from the deep gravity well than they are. So not only is the ship like being pulled in, but it's looking like it's slowing down. And that's like why we see the death remnants of all the light around us, because it does start to become slow motion, and eventually it looks like time has just frozen until you just
wait over that steep of a gradient, like within a ship, like within the
I mean, eventually
5 meters of a ship.
Yeah,
are you alive at that point still?
Probably not.
Okay.
let's be honest. But we threw a camera in there, right? So let's say there's a camera in there, and instead of crying pains of death, it just gets shattered. There is actually a YouTube video that like an astrophysicist from University of Colorado Boulder did try to animate what it looks like going into a black hole, and it's fairly similar to what I described.
With the screams of death and the
not
stretching
the
of the face?
Of death. It's more astrophysics.
Well, then that's
certainly the red. That sort of fisheye lens of everything being red and everything being kind of stretched out. It's hard to wrap your mind around.
Wow. Well, Earl says that this is a remarkably accurate description of when I had my wisdom teeth pulled. So so well done. Well done.
I like that. That's funny.
Hey, I want to tell you, that was crazy.
Awesome.
We're going to take just a second here to tell people what they can find on the Roddenberry Podcast Network, because it's a thing. As I mentioned before, there's a guy, he had a thing. We call it a podcast network, and there are other shows there. So, Josh, if you'll do the honors.
Yeah, there's Mission Log, which this is Mission Log Live.
Oh, I've heard of both of those.
Yes, John is the host of those. There's Priority One Podcast, and they have a live show on Tuesday nights from at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, Priority One is sort of a magazine-style show. It's everything in the Star Trek multiverse, what's happening in that world. Yeah.
Then there's Women at Warp.
You may be asking, Women at Warp, what's that all about? Well, it's Star Trek through a feminist lens, or, as I've heard before, feminism through a Star Trek lens. You take your pick.
And there's the Trek Files, which we just heard from Larry as the host of that.
We sure did. A deep dive into Gene's drawers. What? Yeah.
And there's the Daily Star Trek News.
Oh, okay. I can break that one down for you.
Yeah.
So daily means that happens every week.
Once a week. Sorry,
yeah.
daily. You're right.
Yeah, daily. Star Trek.
That's Star Wars.
Right, exactly. And news, not fake news.
Old
news.
stuff.
Yes, right.
Nailed it.
Perfect. Yes. Yeah.
And then there's our show, which is Shabam.
Shabam. Yeah.
Which is it's a fictional narrative that uses real science to explain concepts that you see in sci-fi.
It's like you've heard it before.
Yes.
Yes.
I've heard it many times.
Very good.
Heard it when it wasn't a thing yet.
Oh, nice. And you can hear all of those at podcast.roddenberry.com. You can subscribe wherever you pick up podcasts. iTunes would be one of those, or Apple Podcasts. Sorry, now they've changed it. So Apple Podcasts or podcast.roddenberry.com. Link to each of those and subscribe to one or all. I hope the answer is all. Grab them all. Podcast.roddenberry.com. I mentioned to you both and to Earl that we have had some great questions from our audience tonight. And I have to mention one here, John, who a little earlier said, Erin, can you confirm that Dr. McCoy was right to prefer the shuttlecraft and that the transporter is just a genocide machine asking for a friend?
Yes.
Thanks.
I want to know the answer to this question.
Yep.
I mean, if you're going to give me an option, I'll probably take the shuttlecraft. And the reason, so Star Trek canon contradicts itself when it comes to the transporter.
Wait a minute. Star Trek canon contradicts itself.
Believe it or not. I know. I know.
Okay.
So I have dove deep into the world of transporters to try to figure out and explain how they work. Star Trek has used different explanations over the years. One is that, as Hoshi described reasonably, it's going to kill me and then make and then move me and then remake me. So that's the idea, that it breaks down all of your particles, moves the particles, and rebuilds the particles into you. And the other explanation is that it kills you. All of that goes back into the replicator system. The data about where everything was is mapped, and then you get built out of other stuff. And so we see different explanations over time. Some result in 2 Rikers, others result in people being held in data patterns until when they crash into a Dyson sphere. So we see these like different explanations. And this is why I love doing Star Trek.
This is good. This is good.
Exactly what I was talking about. Regardless, though, the main issue, and this is the reason I love talking about transporters and why I've dove so deep into these, is because the reason we can't have transporters now is because of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which states you can never know exactly where a particle is. It's just the more you start to zoom in and zoom in and zoom in and learn exactly where it is, the less you know about its motion, and it could be anywhere. So it's this Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which prevents us, because if you're going to break all of this down and rebuild it, I want you to know exactly where every single particle is. But Star Trek brilliantly acknowledges this by having a component of the transporter called the Heisenberg compensator. So until I see and fully understand how a Heisenberg compensator works, I'm going to be taking the shuttlecraft.
Okay, I get, but here's the thing, here's the paradox of the transporter, right? So at once, to John's point, yes, it is a killing machine. It is a thing that either tears you apart at an atomic level and shoots those particles to another place and puts them back together. So during even that fraction of a second that you've been torn apart, you are no longer you. You are gone. You cease to exist. The brain stops functioning. The mind is the product of the brain. You're gone, okay? Or it tears you apart and those atoms just go scattered and somebody comes along and makes a cup of tea and a burrito in the replicator, and that's the particles that the day before were you. Okay, so either way, you're dead at a certain point, but you get rebuilt on the other end. So the paradox is, it is killing you. However, this is an immortality machine, because you can keep making you, and you wouldn't know the difference.
Well, that version of you, right?
Yeah. I was like, until a guy named Tom shows up and F's off.
Okay, okay, so barring creating a clone who's, wasted 8 years of his life. And, still has the hots for his ex-girlfriend. Yeah.
Which is funny, because you could think of like because the whole fundamental principle of like chaos theory is like tiny variance in your starting conditions. And so this idea that every time you're transported, you have a little bit of a variance in your conditions of where you're at. So that's why if you do have multiples of you, one could be good and one could be evil, or at least problematic.
No, you just install the chaos compensator. The de-chaoticizer.
No, we have to technobabble it. So it's like the nonlinear dynamics compensator.
Yeah.
There we go.
Just turn that on.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, this philosophically, that was exactly what Hoshi was talking about in the Enterprise, like why she would refuse to get in the transporter, because she was just like, I will cease to exist. Who am I at that point? Do I have those memories, or are they just being reprogrammed into my brain? All valid questions.
Well, but we're just meat computers full of programming anyway. So look, if you can get me to Paris faster than a 10-hour flight, and I just have to deal with the existential dread that I might have died along the way. And
you won't be in Paris. You will not be in Paris. The copy of John Champion will be. Everyone will think it's you, but
the copy doesn't know the difference, because the copy has an exact neural copy of everything that happened in this noggin right here.
That's true. If we go with the first explanation, you will actually be there. It's just at some point your brain was completely shredded and then put back together again.
Hey, that's every weekend given a chance.
That happens in Paris anyway.
Yeah. Shred the brain. Come on. That sounds great. Don't threaten me with a good time. It's so weird to me that in Star Trek, like either way you slice it, because we've gotten so many emails and people have done very extensive like YouTube videos and deep dive discussions into this. Like either way, it's killing you. Either way, it is making you cease to function as you are. It's not just like, you go to sleep for a minute. I kind of think about, Erin, since you're a Voyager fan, I'm a big fan of the episode Mortal Coil, where Neelix dies and he doesn't go to the Great Forest. And then he comes back and he has this existential crisis because he realizes, okay, when I died, everything just stopped. Yeah. And I had no consciousness. I was not aware. And then he has to actually come up with his own reason for being. He had to realize that it wasn't about this promise of an afterlife. It's about being himself in this living moment. That's really the value of his life. Yeah. Now you're saying that everybody who goes through a transporter has to deal with that every single time. Right.
Well, first, that is a brilliant episode. Like underrated. It's a really complex episode that kind of it breaks your heart a little bit, depending on your opinion of Neelix. but it's a really well written episode, and it's absolutely true. And maybe it's just the fact that once transporters are invented, as long as, because we talk about that too, right? If your brain doesn't know what's going on, if you just blacks out, you wake up, it's like you blinked and you're somewhere else, that's easier for us to wrap our minds around, as long as, or at least it's easier for us to have the cognitive dissonance that okay, I'm still me, because it's instantaneous. Whereas I think with Neelix, and especially because he was, what they said, right when he came out, it was he was dead for 20 minutes
18 hours.
Yes,
it was hours and hours. Yeah,
it's been I don't have that one memorized. But that they said that even though it might have felt instantaneous, you were out for a very long time, and that does. And you can think that that's kind of the same crisis that that Scotty goes through in the episode with the Dyson sphere, that, you know, he comes out of the transporter that he was stored as a data pattern buffer. And even though it's like he's not having a crisis of the afterlife, he's still having a crisis of like so much time having passed and what his existence means.
Right.
That yeah, maybe we all just like give ourselves some nice, happy cognitive dissonance about transporters as long as it's fast.
But isn't the problem still of the continuity of your consciousness, right? Like you come out and that person, that entity still has your thoughts and your memories and, you know, all these crises that they're thinking of. But like the consciousness going in, does it connect to the one coming out? Because if it doesn't, then you're dead. And the other person...
See, that's a question that you ask people who study brains and squishy things, not people who do
I'm
math.
just saying.
All right, next time we're getting a squishy thing expert to come in on the on upcoming episode of Mission Log Live. Hey, I hate that we're out of time, Erin. It is always such a pleasure to talk to you. It's so much
this was
fun.
Awesome.
We don't get to do this nearly enough virtually or in person. So thank you. And Josh, thanks for being the co-host tonight.
Thank you for inviting me. I had a good time. I had a lot of dumb questions that I'm glad I got answered.
I bet you got more.
I did. There's more questions, but we only have an hour. So
all right. Well, then clearly there needs to be a next time. So thank you both.
I'm ready.
And for those of you who are listening or watching, remember next week, my guest will be Dan Curry, the visual effects maestro of the Berman era Trek. So join us next week, Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern for Dan Curry, special guest on Mission Log Live. And until then, Mission Log Live is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment, executive producer Rod Roddenberry. Technical production on Mission Log Live is by the unflappable Earl Green. Be sure to visit podcast.roddenberry.com for the latest from the Roddenberry Podcast Network, including not just Mission Log and Mission Log Live, but Women at War, Priority One, The Trek Files, Daily Star Trek News, and Shabam. If you'd like to support Mission Log directly, head on over to patreon.com/missionlog. Thank you to everyone who joined us live or later, and we will talk to you next week.